Well, welcome back to another episode on Raw Generate's YouTube and podcast channel. And this one's a bit different because it's not a raw food or a fruitarian testimonial. This is really the story of Fee here, who has gone through a lifetime of having a bad relationship with food from herself. And I think that a lot of people can relate to this in a world where we are always being bombarded by the image of, of what it's like to be a woman or to be a man, and how that negatively affects us. And you guys will see, based on the photos that'll be shown throughout this video, and I'll put some up now, that where she got to and where she is now. And really this is a discussion of what it took for her to be in that situation, and also what it took for her to come out of that situation. And hopefully this story can help any of you that are suffering to get out of having body image problems, the way you view yourself, around food. And yeah, so this is Fee. Welcome, Fee. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jake.
Yeah, and just take as much time as you need to say everything you need to say about, just tell your story, and then we'll get into the finer details of things. And we may potentially even do a follow-up video if people want more questions answered on more specifics. But Fee's open to be contacted by you guys if you guys need help. And yeah, so please start from wherever you feel is appropriate and take as much time as you need.
Well, I've always kind of struggled with food in my body, and yeah, a lot of it stemmed from just deep insecurities I had within myself, and yeah, maybe like influences from my family or friends, things that were said in the past. And yeah, ultimately I had a really bad insecurity, and yeah, that somehow turned into a bad relationship with food. And there's even things from my childhood that I think not even my family knows that were going on, and that I remember now, that weren't healthy relationships with food. Like going into the pantry when no one was looking, or just, yeah, I don't know. I grew up on relatively healthy food, eating lots of fruits, veggies. Once in a while we'd have sweets and things like that, but my mom was pretty good on us eating healthy. But yeah, I guess some of the not so good patterns were like going into the pantry when no one was looking and reaching out for the less healthy things.
Yeah, when no one's around. Yeah.
And that was when I was very little. And then like with peer pressure, those insecurities stayed there throughout my childhood. With peer pressure later on in middle school, I'd say like grade 7, 8, that's when I started linking more like, oh, being beautiful means being skinny, and I'm not beautiful because I'm not skinny. And I would start doing diets on and off, like skipping meals at school, trying not to make this noticeable for my family. But eventually I just go back and eat normally. And even though when I was eating normally, I would still hate my body, per se. And that was until like 11th or 12th grade. I was 16, I think. And I remember one night I just started crying at the image of my body, and I decided I'm not going to make excuses anymore. I'm not continuing this path of self-pity, hating my body, and I'm just going to go through with it. And
go through with
losing weight and from the next day on, I just started really extreme diets, I would say.
So you tried a few different diets at the beginning?
Nothing like formal, like none of the formal diets that were out there. It was mostly like skipping 1 or 2 meals or eating just an apple for lunch or whatever.
Yep. 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 So you were doing this as you had told yourself that night that enough was enough, that in order for you to accept yourself, you needed to lose all this weight, and you were going to, this essentially was your ultimatum. It was like the answer that you needed, not knowing of what was actually going to happen from doing that. Yeah. Yeah. And so moving forward through that, it was just a matter of you just pretty much, because you had such a poor relationship with food, you thought, well, I just got to stop eating, essentially.
Yeah, basically. And also that's like in the movies that I would watch or TV shows, that was what was said to be the best way to lose weight. There was always the girls who would skip meals, and even on Disney Channel, like things that children watch, it's very instilled in our minds that it's something normal to do.
Yeah. But something in addition to that is you were still very active.
Yeah.
And more so before than, or were you always just as much that still remained the same?
Well, my whole childhood, I would do sports basically 5 days a week. And when I started going on diets, it was those sports 5 days a week plus an extra workout when I got home or going out for a jog in the weekends. Yeah, and as the time got by, it was more and more physical exercise and less food.
So you were combining eating very low amounts of food volume with high amounts of external output and stress, like 7 days, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
For a very long period of time.
Yeah. It continued until after high school, and I remember, I think this was like the pivotal moment where I actually went down a dark path of dieting was when I came back from my senior trip when I was 17. And I weighed myself and I saw that I gained a couple kilos, and I just fell on the floor crying. And after that, I just started tracking things. Like I had a journal only.
How long into all this was that?
That was like, I would say like 10 months into.
So nearly a year into this of exercising a lot, eating low amounts of food.
Yeah.
You were on that senior year trip, and you noticed you put on a little bit of weight. And at that point, were you already like quite under? Like you're already like a lot skinnier and leaner, but you're still in your mind. You're like, it's not enough. It's not enough. It's not enough.
Not too much. Like before then, I would still try to keep a focus on being sort of healthy. And
so it hadn't really kicked in yet.
Yeah, like I would skip meals, and it was already an unhealthy mentality. But it was after then that it became an obsession.
That was the tipping point. You measured everything.
Yeah.
Right. In the form of what? You measured it. It's like what changed moving forward?
Like I said, I started having this journal where I would track every week. I would weigh myself. I would tape measure my legs, my belly, everything. And I would keep track of what I was eating and cheat meals or everything. And it became, if I don't exercise, then I don't deserve to eat, basically. And I think that's when I started having most anxiety towards food, like getting jittery if I'm eating because I didn't, without exercising, or
I remember you saying to me that you were even too afraid to eat a banana because of the amount of calories there was in a banana.
Yeah, I started also using fitness apps that would count calories, and
Mm.
they would also track the amount of sugar and stuff. So I was scared of eating too much fruit, even though fruit is low on calories. There is still too much sugar in it, so I shouldn't eat fruit.
Hmm.
So I was a bit like, okay, what can I eat then?
Mm-mm. Yeah. And as you said, like food was only something that you told yourself that you deserved if you had already done strenuous exercise or some form of exercise.
Yeah.
And throughout all this, were there any like patterns? Look, as an onlooker now, looking back to that time in your life, was there patterns of things you were telling yourself, things you were convincing yourself of? Because that's something we're going to get into in this talk. Is, as this proceeded to over the months and however much, I don't really know the full length of it, but as you'll continue to say how long it went for,
Mm.
Of things about you denying what was actually going on, because as we can see, this was like an internal, like this is what we're really getting to, is that there's an internal agreement that has happened, and things that have happened in our lives and in your life specifically here that resulted in you going, no, I'm not enough unless I meet this unobtainable goal, which is a bottomless pit, because even if you had reached it, you never would have reached it. And I think we can all know what that's like when you have a goal, you reach the goal, and then it's like, oh no, but that's not enough, there's another one, or that goal is never actually achieved because it's a constantly moving goalpost. So yeah, was there anything like that you noticed now, that you would tell yourself patterns, things that would come up where you're like, no, that's yeah, in relation to that at that time?
It was a lot of like starting to receive compliments after I'd started losing weight. So keep, I was really attached to that, and I would keep telling myself, oh, now I'm actually starting to become pretty because I'm losing weight. So it was, yeah, like if I ate something, I remember I would think that by eating one cheat meal in one day, yeah, one cheat meal in like 2 weeks, that would make me fat overnight. And I would think, oh, I'm not going to be pretty anymore. I'm not going to be deserving of these compliments. And it was a lot about like feeling very insecure within myself, within my own personality, even. So I'm not interesting enough. So I have to be pretty instead. And to be pretty, I have to be skinny. And a lot of it stems from that not being enough. I'm not interesting enough. I'm not pretty enough. Then ultimately, I'm not skinny enough.
And just on that point, like, because I think a lot of people look at the effect of something. We live in a world where it's like, they'll say, "Yo, you look very unwell," and that happened to you at a point where, like you need to go to the hospital or whatever. But that's just like treating the symptom. And what relates with, we can get into a little bit more of this later with like the raw food stuff, is that's just the effect. But the cause of underlying why someone is doing something that's ultimately harming their emotional state and their physical body, did you like begin at that point to see what that was? When was the time when you started to see that, okay, well, this is a never ending, like what was it, the catalyst of you coming out of that? And maybe I'm saying this too soon, maybe there was more that needed to happen before.
A lot happened until that point came. Like I had,
please, yeah, continue.
At some point, my mom would start commenting on the way that I'm eating. Like I'm not eating enough, and I think this is something very common with people with eating disorders. That's when I started lying and saying that I did eat, or I started like pretending that I'm eating and then throwing food out in the garbage. And I would try as much as possible to lead people on the truth. And yeah, after that, I guess a year later or a couple of years later in university, my friends started getting really worried. And
this is over the span of a couple of years so far.
Yeah, this is like 2 years later, but it happened for like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years.
So this whole event in your life spanned over roughly a 5-year span.
Yeah.
This is sort of like 2 years in with you and your friends at university.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to the gym every day. Sometimes I would skip uni classes to go to the gym, and yeah, skipping meals, eating tiny portions whenever I was eating. And then in the gym, I would do a lot of cardio and other things as well too, just and weighing myself every week. Um, and for me, I felt great. I felt amazing. Like I felt a lot of energy, and well, I thought I felt a lot of energy, but I remember some episodes where I felt almost like fainting during class or just falling asleep because I had zero energy. But my mind at the time was tricking me into thinking that I was just feeling really amazing. And my friends would tell me that I was starting to have mood swings and being short tempered, and I couldn't see that at all. And I started being more aware of the way that I was acting and of my patterns, but I still didn't really want to admit it at that point. Because I always had in the back of my mind, I'm not sick enough to be considered sick.
Right. Yeah. It's like that thing of we're only deserving of help or getting well if we've suffered to a greater extent than what we're currently suffering at. Almost like, what is the level that we're going to put ourselves through before that tipping point happens?
Exactly.
Yeah. And at this point as well, like at this point, I imagine you were quite, eating very low amounts of food and high amounts of exercise. That around this 2 year mark, you would have been quite skinny at this point.
Yeah. And around that time that my friends called me out, I remember I was already in my, I guess, at the limit of a healthy BMI.
Yeah.
And I went to the PT in the gym, and I asked her how, like, what kind of exercises and what kind of meal plan can you give me to help me become more lean? And she told me, like, you're already at the minimum. I can't help you with this. And she even drew me a meal plan that was way more than what I was eating at the time, and I didn't want to follow that.
So even though other people, like someone at the gym who coaches people and exercising, was like, you're already at a level that you don't want to get any leaner, and you still weren't denying reality, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that, or the big thing that comes with eating disorders is body dysmorphia, is that you can't see what other people are seeing. And it was like that until like 1 or 2 years after that. I'd already graduated from my bachelor's. I started my master's, and I hadn't seen that group of friends from before, and in a long time. And they saw me one day, and I remember this was, I think this was when I first realized how I looked. My friends arrived in the metro station, and one of them just started crying as soon as she saw me, but it wasn't like wasn't happy tears from seeing me. And I was wondering, what's going on? Is it something in her life that's making her upset? And I tried asking her, and she couldn't answer. And we took some pictures. And looking over those pictures a few days later, I just started crying, and I realized why she was crying. And I saw in me a person that I couldn't see when I looked in the mirror. It was skin and bone, and lack of life in my eyes. And yeah. At that point, my mom had come up to me, and she, up until then, she didn't really know how to react with my situation.
She'd been around you throughout all of this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was living with her and my brother.
Yeah.
And they didn't really know how to address it. And
Like bring it up, talk about it, or anything?
yeah,
Right.
a lot of times it came through criticism of you're not eating enough, or anger, mostly frustration for not knowing how to address it.
Those that know how, yeah.
Yeah, and one day my mom came up to me in a much calmer way, and she asked me if I wanted to go and see a therapist, maybe a nutritionist. And that day I told her no, but a few days or months later, I wrote her a big letter saying exactly what I had been feeling the past years, and okay, I'm not ready to start recovering weight just yet, but I'll agree to see a therapist and a nutritionist to help me maintain the weight, because after seeing that picture, I didn't want to keep losing weight. I'd seen how far I'd gone.
And this was after like nearly 4 years of you doing this, of beginning this road. 3 years, 3, 4. Was this towards the end when you had the photo with your friend?
This was 3 years, no, yeah, 3 or 4 years after.
Yeah. And you said it spanned over 5. So at this point, towards around the 3.5 to 4 year is when you started to come out of it in a way. Like it was that really, it sounds like it was seeing your friend's reaction and seeing the photo that was almost like the turning point for you. And how long after did your mum make that comment?
It was around the same time, maybe a couple months difference.
So in close proximity.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in university, I could still sense that people were looking at me in a weird way, or yeah, that I was different. But I still couldn't see that I was that far gone in it. And yeah, I just was really lying to myself on where I was, and also like, yeah, I wasn't feeling good at all. I was really anxious around food.
The whole time.
The whole time. Like if I felt hungry, I would tell myself that I'm not allowed to feel hungry, or that I shouldn't be feeling hungry. And yeah, if I felt hungry and I would sit in front of food, I would suddenly stop feeling hungry, because my anxiety would be so much that it would just take over all of my senses. And when I was actually eating, I would start shaking. My hands would be shaking. My heart would be palpitating. I would have to take some breaths, maybe meditate before eating, before I could bring any food into my mouth. And then I would feel incredibly sick after eating.
Like every meal? Because you always had this anxiety around you.
Yeah.
While you're eating. Yep. And as you started with the therapist, what were the changes that started to take place? Because it really would, coming out of this would have only been another year and a bit.
With that therapist, I kept getting worse and worse. He wasn't specialized in the field at all, or in this kind of issues. And yeah, he didn't really know how to address it either. And at some point, he was scared for me, and he gave me his phone number and was like, he told me he was scared, and that I should call him whenever I'm feeling low, and that was something that he wouldn't usually do with his patients. But yeah, at the time I was not in a good place. I would see the world as black and white, and I would almost give up on life at some points.
Mm.
And yeah, it kept getting worse. And after a few sessions, I told my mom, like, I keep losing weight and I'm not feeling good at all with this therapist. And a while later, she came to me and she found, I guess, she was the expert in eating disorders in Lisbon.
Mm.
She was way more expensive, and I felt really bad that my mom would have to pay this for something that I did to myself. But I agreed to see her, and I had a lot of guilt around that.
Just because of the price, right?
For the price and everything that everyone around me was going through emotionally as well. And yeah, and this therapist, she was a psychiatrist, not a psychologist, so it was pretty hard seeing her at first because she was very brutally honest and not careful at all with the way her words would impact me or anything. And
Was this of a benefit or not?
I saw later that it was, that I needed that.
Yeah.
But in the moment, I hated seeing her. I was scared of her because she
was showing you stuff you didn't want to see.
yeah,
Is that
and
why?
telling me, like, if you don't lose weight in this week, I'm gonna have to put you in a hospital because you're not gonna make it.
Like if you don't put on weight? Right, so she's saying if you don't put on weight this week, I'll put you in a hospital.
Yeah, basically. And she, right from the first date, she gave me a crazy eating plan that I remember even my brother at the time was like, not even I can eat this amount. But it's what I needed, and even eating that, I wasn't gaining weight. So that's how much my body was malnourished, to the point that a huge amount of food weren't enough. Yeah, and she also put me on medication, and 2 of the things I had to take were not vegan, which for me at the time was very hard because I really wanted to refuse taking them, but I had to.
And do they help?
Honestly, those 2 things were like, it was a high caloric milkshake that you get from the pharmacy. And
It was like whey or something. Like it had dairy in it or something like that.
Yeah, it had milk. It was milk with, I don't know what, but like, very calorically dense. And then fish oil for like brain function. And I kind of made a deal with the psychiatrist, like, okay, if I put on weight, can I stop taking this milk thing? And then I stopped, and the fish thing, I just stopped without telling anyone that I had stopped. But yeah, the medications did help because even though I grew up, even my mom, she's usually against medication, and we don't really take anything. I really needed it at a point because I was in a really dark mindset, and that's what I needed to get the strength to get out of there.
And I take it now you're obviously not on those medications, and how did you get off of them, and what were the next steps getting out of that, and then going back to because obviously there's one thing putting weight on, but that's just the physical body, like what happened and how you viewed yourself and all that coming out of that.
It wasn't until like 2 weeks into seeing that therapist or that doctor that she finally gave me the contact to a psychologist that was working with her, because in the way that she treats her patients, it's body first, mind a little bit later when you have regained a bit of weight, and then working together with both. And for me, that was really hard because I was following her meal plan, but feeling so anxious and with no one to turn to and everything. But then I started seeing a psychologist alongside that, and she really helped. And she was with me for several years until like last year. But yeah, I definitely needed that more harsh approach to everything that I was going through. But I do feel at times that there was a lot of focus on my physical recovery and not so much on my mental recovery. So
from both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
They worked together, so it was the same. Because last year I was already recovered per se, and this is a big thing in the eating disorder world where people see it as a physical illness when in fact it's a mental illness.
Yeah, it's complete. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I was physically recovered, so it was all good, but in my head it wasn't at all. And I was struggling a lot, even now, even being in a restored body, but still suffering from everything that I was suffering through when I was way underway. So
like the mental state is still there.
Yeah,
like feel it's not physical, as you said.
So everyone is telling me how healthy I look and how much better I look, but in my head I'm just telling myself how fat I look and how I hate my body. And
and that's what I think that the main or the crux of why I want to discuss this is when you change your internal emotional environment, then that's going to be what turns you in whichever direction, good or bad, and that your physical body will follow suit to that. So if you're emotionally not feeling well, you're going to go downhill physically, and that's what you're experiencing. As you family, oh, you look great, you look glowing, whatever, you very healthy looking, but whatever. And it's like that's the opposite of what we're telling us in our mind. So what were things that you either found in yourself, got help from others, family, friends, things you read, whatever it may have been, that helped you start to see that and regain that, what you call it, self-love, or that connection back to yourself? Actually, hey, like I actually am okay. Like I am worth, I'm allowed to eat food. I'm not bad for eating this, or that negative talk that you had.
Well, therapy helped to a certain degree. At some point I did feel like it started stagnating and I wasn't getting much out of it. And I realized that I either was doomed for the rest of my life. One thing that my dad tells me a lot is that, and that I do read online, is that people with eating disorders, they never really get out of it. But I don't know, part of me didn't want to believe in that. So I was just like, okay, I'll use my therapist as an aid, but there's work that I can do here for myself.
Like you weren't just going to accept that this was going to be you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Good. Nice. That's cool.
And yeah, for a while I was completely off social media, because comparison was a huge thing for me, comparing my body to others and my life to others, and that was only digging my hole
deeper.
Yeah. And also like taking off the settings for the YouTube ads, because if I search for one workout video, suddenly everything in my suggestions were workout videos, diets, and things like that. And
bringing you back to a world you don't want to go to.
Yeah, and other media as well, like videos of what I eat in a day and things like that, which I used to be obsessed over, and not realizing that a lot of it is not complete reality.
No. This is what I ate just on this one day for this video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And I just want to add a side note to that. Like, I know quite a few like raw foodists
mhm.
or people that eat predominantly raw food, and like I eat predominantly raw food. But the reality is, I don't always eat raw food. That's what I'm moving towards more so. But I've realized a lot of these people, they don't just eat raw food. There are some that are hardcore, like they've been that way, or they say, like, I've had a slip up here and there, or whatever, or but it's not a competition. But what that's telling the audience watching is a
Yeah.
false reality. Like, I'm always eating this. Is always like this. Is always what I have. This blah blah. It's perfect. Life's great. It's like the most amazing thing. It's like, no, there's that. Yeah, and it's an important uh, thing to realize, especially for younger people that are very, they're very impressioned by these things. And I got really sucked down into using chronometer and things like that to measure calories
Mm-hmm.
and and I remember not understanding why when I'd put certain fruits in chronometer, why the charts, the percentages would go through the roof, and I thought they were bad because of certain things,
Yeah.
like in a banana or
Exactly.
certain tomatoes or whatever it may have been. Bananas was like the main one, and that often is. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but sorry, yeah. So did you start to just like turn the ads off, not watch those videos?
Mm-hmm.
You didn't want any of that in your world anymore because, like, no, this is going to bring me down.
Yeah, and
Mm.
still it was really hard because I was watching TV shows or movies, and everything would be a trigger, and
Mm.
um, yeah, I just had to skip some episodes or things like that because there would be too big a focus on diet and yeah,
Mm.
it's yeah not easy trying to avoid everything, and then also comparing myself with the members of my family. This was during COVID, so I was always at home with my brother and sometimes my mom. So it was very easy to compare what I was eating to what they were eating.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
and for a while, I had to be very antisocial if I wanted to get better.
Mm.
Just, um,
So during this sort of recovery phase, you could call it, you were
mhm.
more antisocial,
Yeah,
more to yourself. Were you still like working out? Were you pulling away from doing like 7-day workouts and that kind of thing that you were doing before?
I was still working out.
Yeah.
I, yeah, I guess I wasn't very honest with that with my doctors and my family, but I would still work out because I was always scared of putting on weight but not being fit. So I would give myself that, okay, I'm gonna eat what they want me to eat, um, be, yeah, try to be healthy,
Mm.
but at least I have this clutch of working out.
Mm. Right.
I just wasn't doing cardio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when did more of these changes come in? Where, because you said you're working with your psychiatrist, was it? Psychologist and
Both
psychiatrist,
of them, yeah.
both of them. You work with a psychologist and a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, until last year. What is it like now when it comes to seeing what the cause or the underlying cause of why that night happened? That night when you're like, that's it. I'm just going to stop eating. I'm going to work out a lot, and and then that became the next 5 years of your life. Um, looking back from that, can you see? I'm sure there's a lot of people that can relate to events, how you felt around food,
Mm.
and realizing, wait a minute, this isn't about actually weight. This isn't about
Yeah.
how I look. This is about how I feel I should look, how I feel I should be, and what really brought that brought that about within you. And is that still as strong? Is it less strong? Your relationship with food
Mm.
now, and yeah.
Like I said, a lot of it was insecurity and the feeling of not being enough.
Mm.
Um, but I also realized that throughout my childhood, especially middle school, or from the ages probably 8 to last year,
Mm.
I was a very depressed kid. and very anxious as well. I guess one of the reasons might have been my parents' divorce. I'm not entirely sure, but I had a big depression that I just kept ignoring, and the people around me also kept ignoring. A couple of teachers did try to address it to me, but my parents wouldn't recognize it, so I just kept brushing it aside. And yeah, and I guess maybe this eating disorder was a way of my body saying, okay, you're not listening to your emotional state, so I'm gonna make this a physical thing so that you can see it, or that people around it can see it, and you can finally seek help. And honestly, if it weren't for this eating disorder, which now I'm thankful for because of this, I probably wouldn't have been treated for depression and anxiety, or at least not as soon as I was. And yeah, I feel way better now.
Yeah, that's great. And because we've done the iridology together, and I had seen photos online, but hadn't really known your story or what you were going through. And, you know, when we did do the eyes and had a look at the eyes, we did see, you know, because there's certain glands relating to the body utilizing calcium, which is associated with depression. And one of the things I think one of the nutritionals, the doctor said to you was, you know, risk of osteoporosis and these kind of things. And how, like, as we now coming out of this as any human, or you specifically, as we're strengthening the glands of the body, that this alleviates the feeling of depression. Like, we always see depression with weak parathyroid glands specifically, which there's a bit of that weakness in your body. And now, because we met here at this community, and something we were talking about the other week, which I think is important to touch on, is some of the things that you've done since being here, like my brother who did the NLP hypnotherapy with you when it comes to food, and how you're now eating a lot of foods that before that you were like, I would not eat banana because that's like, you know, what is that like now, and how do you feel when you eat those things? Because you already, in terms of food, you're eating what is ultimately a very high fruit diet with salad for easily nearly, from what I've seen, 2 months, but beyond being here.
Well, honestly, it was 2 years ago that I came to Australia first, and throughout those 2 years, when I got here, I was already recovered from the anorexia. But then I started, because my emotional state still wasn't recovered. I was still having a very bad relationship with food, and I started going down the other end as well, which was bouncing between binge eating and emotional eating, with restricting and not eating at all. And throughout those 2 years, I've been just bouncing off these two, and still not having a great relationship with food. And I would still do it until fairly recently, less so, but still fairly recently. And then I did the hypnotherapy with Sam, your brother, and that really helped me. Also, like, certain situations in my life, these until like a couple months ago, that were fairly stressful, would keep me in these patterns, and resolving those also helped me regain a better relationship with myself. And then paired with the hypnotherapy sessions with Sam, I started noticing that I wasn't reaching out to food as much, as a band-aid for the things I was feeling.
Which before you would do, like, emotionally eat.
Yeah. I would emotionally eat and then fast.
I can relate to that. I think a lot of people can relate to doing that. It's almost
Yeah.
like you reach rock bottom, and then you just gorge yourself to whatever degree, and then you go, that's it, and then I'm gonna be, and then it's just this little cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But all coming from deep insecurities.
But so after doing the NLP sessions with Sam, you start to notice that you weren't. This is just here at the community here.
I'm surprised, but actually, right after the first session, I was like, I haven't binged since then.
Since the session. Cool.
Yeah, and that's been great. And then, since then I've been focusing more on also not fasting, because I know that, okay, fasting can be a healthy thing for many people, but people with eating disorders, and this is why like apps for intermittent fasting and things like that, they always ask, do you have a history of eating disorders? And if you check yes, they don't allow you access to their apps.
That's good.
Because it's very easy for us to turn it into an obsession and use it for not healthy reasons. And I basically, even though here it's really hard because people are talking about fasting and different diets all the time, and I just had to focus more on myself and tell myself, okay, I'm not fasting anymore. And if I do it for any purpose, I'll be very attentive as to why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And if it's for the purpose of losing weight, or if there's any guilt behind it, I just won't allow myself to do it anymore. And now I'm focusing more on nourishing my body. And a phrase that I often repeat to myself is, I eat healthy, I live a healthy lifestyle. Whatever my body looks like is what I'm meant to look like.
That's great. Yeah. No figure, no number of got to be this amount of kilos, this amount of that.
Yeah.
And this is why, like, as you know, by spending time with me, that I don't even, with my clients and with anyone, it's like I don't even care about calories. It's this whole calorie weight thing. Just don't even worry about it. If you're eating good plant foods, you're going to be fine. And whatever that, as long as you eat exactly, you're looking after yourself, you know you're eating healthy. It's not going to the fast food chain and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's like whatever my body looks like is what it's meant to look like. That's beautiful. And since eating, like, because I think up until like maybe a couple months ago, you weren't really doing, like, you were doing fruit, but you weren't doing fruit in the morning, and now you've been eating a lot of that. And you were saying something to me just the other day about that you notice like less anxieties around, was it around fruit or food in general since you've been doing this?
I would on and off, even when I was younger, eat just fruit in the morning because it always felt good, but often I would pair it with oats or something, and now I've been doing more of just fruit in the morning. And a lot of salads as well, and I guess 80%, 90% raw.
Yeah, easily. Yeah.
And honestly, I'm feeling much less anxiety towards food, and I'm going towards everything in my life with, if something is triggering me, if something is causing me anxiety, and maybe that's something that I need to challenge myself to do, and or take a step back and, why is this making me feel this way? So if we go out with some friends or whatever and we're not gonna eat raw, before that would have caused me a lot of anxiety, and now I just don't really feel that. And when I feel it, it's in very small amounts. And again, I take a step back and challenge myself to do it, so that in the future it doesn't bring any anxiety a lot. And this is something, I guess, if I don't know if people see videos online about people with eating disorders, one big thing is challenges. And this is something that I did with myself along my journey for sure to help me through it. It was that there's a lot of anxiety that comes with this disease or illness. And so the anxiety is always going to be there. No matter what I eat or what I do, the anxiety is always going to be there. But doing things over and over and over again, that's how the anxiety starts quieting down. So challenging myself to eat one thing that before I would consider a cheat meal, or what the internet loves to call bad foods, like eating an ice cream one week. The first time it was terrifying. After a while, it started becoming normal. And okay, maybe at some points I wasn't reaching out to the healthiest foods, but I had to go a bit on the other side of the spectrum to heal my relationship with food.
Yeah, exactly. And as you said, like, you're thankful for what happened and where you are now with, because, like, I don't think you're gonna have anxiety around food forever, like, because as those glands get stronger, the body just starts to move through emotional things more and more until it's like completely cleared. And I think it's easy for us to think that because something has always been a certain way, that it must always be that way.
Yeah.
You know, maybe if someone's like always been obese and, you know, they can never see themselves being able to run, it's like that doesn't have to be a reality. It may take time. It might take most of your life. It might take 2 years, whatever. It doesn't matter. Like, but it'll like, we're all in a state of healing anyway, like, on multiple levels. So
and a lot of it is also linked to attachments. Like, I was at some point very attached to the label of anorexia. And for a while, that was my entire personality or my entire identity for me. So it was very scary for me to think of healing from this or recovering from this. And yeah, I would think, well, after I recover from this, who am I going to be? How are people going to see me, and how are they going to distinguish me from other people?
So it's like you were identifying with your illness. So it's like, what am I beyond that? That's a question I use with my clients, of when they're so hung up on their life of suffering, it's almost like an addiction to it, or like that you attach to that. And then asking that question of, well, what if, paint yourself a picture of, you're not like this. You have an abundance of energy. You have deep self-love, and you have all the support around you. What is your life going to look like?
Yeah, and for a while I was Fee the skinny girl, so I was scared of, okay, now I'm in a recovered weight. What am I now? I'm just Fee, and that's scary. And then I started going to communities of very different type of people. And that's when I really started feeling love towards me, like unconditional love, where people would come to me and hug me and just look joyful around me, not because I did anything or looked a certain way. It was just because I was me, and that was enough.
So you feel that being in these communities throughout your travels, I would presume, has really helped with that healing within yourself too?
Definitely, yeah.
That's amazing. It's like having genuine human connection without, as you said, it wasn't like you did a certain thing and you were trying to impress someone, and then you got a positive affirmation from them. It's like you were just being you, and there's people there giving you love without any. Yeah, that's beautiful. And how long have you been traveling for?
It's been 2 years in Australia, and I did a few months, maybe like 3 months in Portugal or in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Before
So,
coming here.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and throughout that time, you've been to multiple communities.
It's just here in Australia.
Yep. And would there be anything else you would like to say in relation to this for other people that might be other, maybe young women and girls that are struggling with something very similar, of maybe ways they can, well, already if they're watching this video, they're probably already thinking of getting help anyway. But what could be some steps maybe, because it can be scary, as you said, like, if I'm not Feed the Skinny Girl anymore, then what the fuck am I going to be? If I'm not this, like, having that courage is really hard. And how did you find that courage?
Well, one thing for sure is realizing that I don't want my life to be set around food the whole time, because 24/7 the only thing I would think about was food or my body. And that is not a good place to be, because I couldn't be present with my friends or in the moment, any moment, because I was constantly thinking of those things and constantly feeling anxious about them. And I realized there's a huge space of time in my life where that was my life. And okay, I did other things. I graduated from university. I got a master's degree. I did a lot of accomplishments, publishing books and whatever, but my focus was not on those things. My focus was on food and my body. But yeah, definitely one thing I would say is like, there's a lot of control in eating disorders, a wanting and desire for control. If you can't control the world around you, then what can you control? You can control what you eat. You can control how your body looks. So there's a lot of a fear of losing power, and definitely seeking help and going to a therapist was this loss of power. And yeah, and at least in the more spiritual worlds, also in society, there's a bit of I don't know, like people are scared sometimes of seeking help because of the way that it might appear to people around them. And sometimes it might be deemed as weak to seek help because you're supposed to go through things by yourself.
Not knowing how to accept help.
Yeah.
For like maybe as well of like having low self-worth. You know, I can relate to that, you know, that if you're not deserving of help, so why would you go and seek it?
Yeah. And maybe it's not impossible to move through this without therapeutical help, but at least for me it was
huge.
It was huge.
Yeah.
And not easy for sure, but especially with the psychiatrist I had, she was very harsh, but I am thankful, because without that I would have just kept lying to everyone. And
yeah, she was breaking you out of a false reality that you created.
Yeah.
A story, essentially.
Yeah. And another thing is also medications. Like, I've always been kind of against medications, and I felt it very embarrassing in a way that I had to take medications to get better. And a lot of people have this idea that medications are bad, you shouldn't be taking anything, but sometimes they can be helpful too. And especially when you're in such a low point, it can help, at least for a little bit, until you're stable enough to move through the things going inside you and to heal your outside self as well.
Yeah, I often wonder, like, what it would have been like, and this is why people watching this too, how powerful herbs are when it comes to things like depression and anxieties. Because you know, I've heard that there's going to be a hospital. It's going to be a pharmaceutical-free hospital. I believe it's in Puerto Rico or somewhere. I believe Dr. Yaki's working on it, and it's using herbs in diet specifically on a very extreme level, meaning like using them in a clinical sense, for that, because those herbs do, and a lot of these pharmaceuticals are based off of plants anyway. But as you said, like, we shouldn't feel ashamed to seek whatever help we need to seek to get ourselves out of like pretty much rock bottom, because how much lower can you get, you know, death essentially. And yeah, it's beautiful that you were able to do that, and it really sounds like that what was this, at least from, was seeing your friend and her reaction and then seeing the photos, like that was, and that it may be a different turning point for everyone, because it sounds like that was the first crack of the shell essentially of this world that you had created around yourself that wasn't real.
Yeah.
And I do remember you saying to me that you wouldn't, you'd notice when you'd sit down and you wouldn't be able to sit down for long because it would be painful because you had nothing.
No, yeah.
No cushioning on your bum.
Yeah, in university I would have to fold the jacket underneath the seat
Yeah.
or on the seat so that I could sit down and for it not to be painful. And other things, like, it is not a comfortable position to be in. Like, another thing that isn't talked about much is that you essentially lose or start losing control of your bladder. So a lot of times I would have very close calls to the toilet. And yeah, things like constipation, the anxiety was definitely the biggest thing, and hypersensitivity of all of the senses. So I remember walking around my house with headphones because the loud,
like earmuffs, or just headphones to block sound out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there would be a loud sound and I would just jump or become super anxious. And while I'm eating, I couldn't be able to hear loud sounds. And a lot of times I would have to blast music really loud while I was eating so I wouldn't hear anything around me. And if I was eating in university, I would have to find a quiet corner with no one who would be possibly looking at me or no noise around me so that I wouldn't feel anxious. So I was losing weight like I wanted to, but I was not living a normal life.
Did you only see these realities after coming out of it? Like during it, it was there, but you just like denied it?
It was there and it was uncomfortable. Sometimes I wouldn't link it to my condition because I was still very much in that mentality of I'm not sick enough. But yeah, my family would my family and my friends would make me aware of it. Like, don't you see that you do this? This is not normal. And I would deny it a lot.
Were there any like just things that you experienced, obviously like not being able to sit down for a long period of time, other physical things that just stopped, you said, like not being able to like hold your urine in, because things like that and anxieties, like this is once connective tissue in the body stops working and you can't hold your pee in, like that's already signs, obviously without you knowing, but from what I hearing that is like there's the glands going down they're no longer functioning. So like things, this is like, old people as they get older, they can't hold their bladder. And it's like those were things you experienced because your body was in a very stressful state. Were there other things as well that that you sort of didn't link to what was happening, but that on a physical level that maybe people here that may not, there might be someone watching the video that may think they need help but maybe not know how to do that, and maybe there's things that they might think like, oh well, I'm not like you, or maybe I'm experiencing another symptom and I'm not really aware of what that is, and if that's actually something I should be concerned about.
Well, other very common things are like thinning of hair and
Mm.
having very dry hair and nails, and um, yeah, fainting and having zero energy. And also, like, I was going to university, and I honestly don't know how I
Yeah, it's crazy.
managed that, because it was very hard for me to even think or retain information, because obviously my brain wasn't functioning how it should.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, but it is astounding what the human body can go through.
yeah. The other
Um,
thing was like bruising.
mm.
I would bruise so much for the tiniest thing, even sleeping, because I sleep on my side. So I'd have my knee bones touching each other,
And a bruise there.
and I would wake up with huge bruises on my knees.
Mm. Crazy. Yeah, and that's it's interesting because there's people, even people that aren't in a anorexic state or have, body dysmorphia or something like this, that they'll experience these sort of symptoms and just think it's normal. And it's interesting what we deem acceptable, or I'm not unwell enough, or I don't deserve to go and get that help yet because, of X reason. But again, like this self-denial essentially, which is
Yeah.
what we're doing in those situations. But
And
um,
also, like, at least for me, there was a lot of comparison,
mm,
and I had to accept that I have no clue what is going on in the other person's head or life or reality. Because there was this one girl in university, I would compare a lot with her, and she was really skinny in my idea of beautiful at the time. And she would hardly eat, but she was always happy, and she didn't seem like an anxious person at all.
mm,
And it was only later, when I was already in my recovery journey, where I found her on social media, and I saw that she had confessed to having an eating disorder as well, when
mm,
before she was also lying to herself and others, saying that she was perfectly fine. And
mm,
I believed in that.
mm,
And I would think, oh, then what's wrong with me that I'm always anxious and always scared of food, and I'm not even as skinny as her?
mm, mm. Yeah, back to that comparison thing.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's amazing that you're not there anymore, and that it's really great to hear that, by being in communities with people
Mm.
and seeing that you, just like every human, is deserving of love, not because we need to prove anything, just because we're human. That's like the basics of what we deserve.
Mm.
Um, yeah, is amazing. So, are there any last things you want to say before we wrap this up, or?
Well, like, it's a big journey of learning self-compassion and
Mm,
self-love. And one thing that I don't know, I would read up a lot on how to help myself with this, and one big thing would be, or one big title would be, body positivity. And right now I see that that didn't really help me at all, because I
mm,
was going from I hate myself to I love myself. And if
mm,
I don't love myself, then I'm beating myself up for not loving myself.
mm.
And now,
Petrol wheel.
yeah,
Yeah.
and now instead of advocating for that, I see that I agree way more with what is called body neutrality, which is a lot of self acceptance. Like,
Mm,
I am this way and I'm okay with it.
mm,
Some days I love it, some days I don't, but I'm okay with it.
mm-hmm,
And
mm,
also looking at my body as in, uh, I love my legs because they allow me to run, or I love my arms because they allow me to hug my friends,
mm,
things like that.
mm. That's a much better way of looking at it, opposed
Mm-hmm.
to my arms are this thickness or this thinness, or my legs are this width or whatever. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for literal practical function.
Mm-hmm.
It is interesting that you look at Eastern cultures that use their bodies for a practical function majority of the time, and here we are in the Western cultures not doing that, and we're going to the gym for non-practical functions, going to the gym because we want to get aesthetic look, and I think we're subconsciously looking at our bodies in that manner, in the manner of, well, it's got to be the certain aesthetic look. But what you just said is amazing, because it's really been thankful for the gift of having a body that works. Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, I think we'll end on that note. Cool. Awesome, Fee. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cool. Oh, if people want to get in touch with you, what can they do? I'll put your links for your Instagram down below. And you did mention you do writing. So I just wanted to actually check. During all this, you were still writing books and publishing work, and wow, including your studies.
Yeah. And I guess in my journey, I start, of course, hanging out more in nature and feeling more connected to nature and feeling the healing power in that. And also started writing about the healing power of nature.
And did that translate into some of the works you published?
I guess it's a work in progress that I still haven't published.
Okay, but you have published a lot of books already I'll link all of that in the description as well, and if people want to reach out to you and chat, and if you can help them, that from what I understand, you're happy with that. Yeah, cool. Awesome. Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Thank you.